What do you think you should rely on more when it comes to your analysis with Bitcoin? I'm going to give you two options. Number one would be Bitcoin priced in the US dollar or Bitcoin priced in gold. Okay, some of you may be tempted to say, oh yeah, definitely Bitcoin priced in the dollar. That's all that I look at. And you have a point with that. I mostly look at Bitcoin's price in its dollar valuation while also looking at the gold charts, the Bitcoin gold charts. But let me ask this question in a different way. And I'm going to put a chart here on the screen that I think you're going to find very interesting. So what would you rather rely on as a proper way to look at charts? Bitcoin priced in an asset that is losing its value every year and will one day be completely worthless, or Bitcoin priced in an asset that's as old as time and people have been using for thousands upon thousands of years. Okay, in my opinion, yes, the Bitcoin USD chart, it's not, you just don't ignore it. It does matter a great deal, but you also very much should not ignore the Bitcoin price and gold chart. Why am I saying this? Well, let me put this chart on the screen and let me show you what bear markets for Bitcoin look like priced in gold. And you're going to see something similar now. You're going to see cycles and you're going to see a process that has repeated itself multiple times. And so what are we seeing here? Well, Bitcoin has a rally in its gold valuation, and then it takes exactly 52 weeks to hit its bear market bottom. You can see in 2018, big blow off top in Bitcoin, and gold was pretty stable at that time. So if that does look like also the US dollar valuation chart, then yes, doesn't that make sense that we would bottom the same time that Bitcoin bottomed in its US dollar valuation? Fast forward to 2021, pretty much the same deal. Bitcoin did put in a higher high in November of 2021 and then took some time to bottom and then bottomed in November of 2022. So 52 weeks. I don't think I'm speaking to people who need to hear this. I'm just going to say that. That's a 1 year bear market. Does that sound familiar? Right? We have the 1 year bear market that bottoms out in the fourth quarter of every year, apparently. Well, here's another 1 year bear market in an asset that is much more reliable, an asset that holds its value over long enough timelines, an ounce of gold. And so here's what the bear market looked like this past time. Bitcoin hit its all-time high about a year earlier than its recent bottom. And when was that? That was in January of 2025, In January of 2025, Bitcoin peaked. Its price it peaked at $109,000, but in its gold valuation, that was the peak for this cycle. Yes, Bitcoin did put in a higher high in its US dollar valuation. It put in two higher highs actually in its US dollar valuation, but in its gold valuation, Bitcoin put in a lower high. And so from that peak in January of 2025, it took exactly 52 weeks for Bitcoin's price to bottom in gold. And since then, you can see on this chart, it's rallied. It has rallied since then. Now, how much of that has to do with Bitcoin itself? How much of that has to do with gold? That's a discussion we can have right now. Yeah, gold has certainly topped. It's down about 20% from its peak. But I would also like to point out that Bitcoin has bottomed. And as far as where gold is going from here, it's probably going to continue to chop or grind down, but it's not like we're going to see a huge crash in the price of gold. That's just not how gold operates. So when it comes to catching up and either putting in a new all-time high in its gold valuation or putting in a lower high in its gold valuation, Bitcoin is going to do the brunt of the work here, because from its bottom so far, Bitcoin is also up about 20%. It's gotten up about 20%. So what is it? What is it? There's two different things at play here. And I could see a scenario where both would work themselves out, but it's unlikely. Is it the 4-year cycle in the dollar valuation following 3 years of bullishness? We peaked on October 6th, and then we're going to bottom out on October 5th of 2026. Is it that, or is it this, or is it both? What is a scenario where it could be both? I'm trying to think through that. Let's say that, so gold last I saw got under $4,300 and now it's after peaking at something like 5,500. Could gold have a little bit of a rally while Bitcoin stays stagnant? And then in October of this year, Bitcoin does put in a low in its dollar valuation, and also but it puts in a higher low in its gold valuation. That's possible, sure. But if we're going to go by cycles that I would prefer to rely on, my preference is in the gold valuation and not the dollar valuation. Because if you look at the US dollar in comparison to other assets around the world, I don't really think it's worth, it's not, what's the word? It's not law. You know, Bitcoin, I can get behind a law behind Bitcoin. I can get behind a law behind gold. When you factor in the dollar into these equations, I'm not going to be willing to commit to any laws. I mean, for example, let me show you the Bitcoin chart priced in the Swiss franc. And what you'll see with the Swiss franc is actually a very clean looking chart where the Swiss, in its Swiss franc valuation, it did not hit new all-time highs in September and October. It put in something like a triple peak. And then not only that, but it went down beautifully to its 200-week moving average, which is a historical bear market bottom for Bitcoin, at least when we measure it in the dollar. But this thing held with the Swiss franc perfectly at the 200-week moving average. The Swiss franc, it's got its problems. It's a fiat currency, but in my opinion, it's a much more reliable currency than the dollar. It's been increasing in its valuation in comparison to the dollar for quite a while now. And this chart explains to me an entirely different story when we're factoring in what is Bitcoin worth. Okay, this chart, you can't really measure 4-year cycles based on a Bitcoin Swiss franc chart. So why are we measuring 4-year cycles based on Bitcoin and the US dollar? The US dollar is weakening in influence. It's weakening in its purchasing power. If that point's not now, at some point in the future, we are going to have to stop measuring Bitcoin in dollars. I would prefer sooner rather than later because there's much more reliable assets like Bitcoin versus gold, like Bitcoin versus Swiss franc, like Bitcoin versus lots of other things. So that's just my 2 cents on that. But if we're going to say that it's written in the code that Bitcoin has to do things a certain way, in my opinion, a 52-week bear market with Bitcoin priced in gold is a much better indicator than a 52-week bear market with Bitcoin priced in the dollar, because the dollar is a melting ice cube. Gold is not.